for all. Democrats have been winning elections even in red states with a very different message on health care, protecting Obamacare. Democrats are divided on this issue. What do you say to voters who are worried that your position on Medicare for all could cost you critical votes in the general election?
So I look out and I see tens of millions of Americans who are struggling to pay their medical bills. 37 million people who decided not to have a prescription filled because they just can't afford it.
Now, what's wrong with that question? Thing is, Warren can argue Medicare for all extremely well. I've said that in the beginning. When her and Sanders was arguing Medicare for all, I thought that was the greatest thing ever. These two in a foxhole fighting for this particular policy. The bill, full-throatedly, unabashedly, unashamedly, in front of a bunch of neocons. And did so well and got better and better with that particular argument as that argument went on. Problem. MSNBC, when it was announced that MSNBC would be hosting this, I thought, oh, this is utterly horrible. A, there's conspiracy theorists on that stage, but B, and more importantly, MSNBC has a clear bias. Washington Post, clear bias. And it works in favor of some and works against others, in favor of those who they like, who they acknowledge as being an okay candidate from their particular perspective, and against and a disadvantage for those who they don't like, who maybe they don't consider to be Democrats, or is out of kilter with the policies that they think will be okay. People, and I always get slightly annoyed with conservatives when they say this is the left. This is not the left. MSNBC is corporate left, if you can call it that. And what I mean by that is, yes, we're okay with gay, we're okay with straight, we're okay with black, we're okay with Asian, transgender, all that stuff. We, from a standpoint of identity, yes, we love that stuff. But leave economic concerns off the table. The catch here is, from the standpoint of what they consider to be a tilt in the society, Warren will be accepted far more than Sanders. And especially if you're looking at the hosts on that network, those hosts tend to prefer Warren over Sanders. For that matter, Warren over even Joe Biden. This is the candidate that all intents and purposes, if you're looking at MSNBC, they seem to like. They asked her a question on Medicare for all. Now, what all of us know, is that Warren had just put out her Medicare for all, quote unquote, transition plan. And immediately when she did that, she was discredited because ultimately her Medicare for all transition plan was just Pete Buttigieg's healthcare plan. It was a public option that politically had no ability to get passed because there was no way she was going to get two bites at the apple on that healthcare plan, let alone have it passed at the timetable that she is indicating that this, like, boom, is going to be done immediately and all of this stuff is going to be done in this technocratic way, as if there are not going to be these major fights on Capitol Hill, and as if there's not going to be major pushes to A, stop her from getting this bill passed, but B, a second bite at the apple. Do you know healthcare stocks on the day that this was launched, healthcare stocks went through the roof. And I'm sitting there looking at this trying to figure out why. It's because they all realized that this plan had zero chance of achieving Medicare for all, or a very small probability of chance of achieving Medicare for all. And it was a plan designed to fail by somebody that wanted to run on this notion of Medicare for all because she understood how popular it was. Even people in her own campaign said they didn't know they would have to put out a policy proposal for healthcare, the most important thing in the race at this point. And why would you have to put out a policy proposal if you were indeed supporting Medicare for all, which is, I keep saying breathlessly, is a bill? They didn't ask her that. That wasn't the question they asked her. They didn't ask her anything regarding that. The dodge in this on the Medicare for all is not asking her the question that everybody in the world would ask if they were being legit. Why do you believe your plan is going to be successful to achieve Medicare for all, considering that ultimately you just have a public option? Do you really believe you're going to get two bites at the apple politically in 3 years to get Medicare for all passed? That's a question pertaining to that. I guess my point is, considering that she had just put out that plan and she was just getting hit for putting out that plan, wouldn't the most obvious question in the world be in terms of this plan? Is it true that you just wanted to run on Medicare for all, and yet you didn't really have it in you for it? And this plan doesn't really have any chance of politically succeeding. The way you chose to pay for this, aren't there certain disincentives in the way that people will do their business as people and the society itself conform to the Medicare, wink, wink, for all plan that you're putting forth? And if society has to change once because of this plan, meaning this country is a very big economy, is it really a good idea to have it change again in 3 years with a certain degree of uncertainty hanging over their heads on whether or not you're going to be able to pass Medicare for all? There's several questions that you can ask pertaining to this. You can even get into what she's considered funding it. You didn't choose to cut the military budget when you had the opportunity to do so. You even called that budget corrupt, and you still voted for that budget. You're putting this as one of those things that are necessary in order to pass Medicare for all. Will that make passing Medicare for all that much more difficult if you can't get the military budget cut? You've tied immigration to your health care plan. Is it wise to tie passing immigration to a health care plan in this way? Doesn't that make it that much more difficult to get the health care plan passed? I don't care how deep you go into it or how wonkish. I just mean that if you're going to ask her a question at all, shouldn't that question be on elements of her Medicare for all plan, the actual elements, not a plan that allows her to not talk about the Medicare for all plan that she put out at all, meaning Pete's plan, but instead allows her to go into this esoteric question of whether or not other people will be okay with Medicare for all. I hope you get my point. It's allowing a dodge. It's allowing her to avoid talking about the substance of her plan and talk about it in theory. The same thing is true, however, for people it disadvantages. That's kind of the point that we're getting at. That's not incompetence. That's intentional. It is also not incompetence when Yang gets ignored or when they slander Sanders. In this specific case, Yang, one of those people being disadvantaged by this, is speaking out about this and has gone so far as to say he is boycotting MSNBC until he gets an apology from the network. This all is based on this, the Democratic debate. Despite Yang being ahead of some of the other quote-unquote top-tier candidates, Yang got the least time in that debate. And his point is, this is not accidental, this is intentional, and this continues to happen over and over again. Welcome to the Soapbox.
It's true, you know, whatever. And just she said to me that when Bernie said Hillary wasn't qualified, they took that a little sexist, you know, just like, how could the Secretary of State, 103 countries that she visited, two-time senator, right, you know, First Lady, civil rights lawyer, not be qualified? You can say he's not right for the job, but so then all of a sudden every day I'm getting the email.
This is apex predator Harvey Weinstein. And I think everybody would agree that Harvey Weinstein. I think everybody at this point would agree that he is a pervert. He has been abusive to various women in the context of his position and his power and political authority. And this guy was a major Democratic donor. He is out here, surrogate for one Hillary Clinton, on MSNBC calling Bernie Sanders sexist. Think about that for a moment. Apex pervert. He knows his sins, even if you don't know his sins. And he is on this network saying that Bernie Sanders is sexist. And if you notice the motif, somebody told me this and I thought this was an interesting thing. So I'm going to repeat this now on the network in order to gaslight its supporters into believing what I'm saying is true because some other people said it. MSNBC has clear biases. And it's one thing for me to have a show named Jamarl Thomas because I tell you my biases. I tell you my political ideology. I breathlessly tell you every time I get out here and make a pitch or make an argument or even go into somewhat of a rhetorical flourish. You know who I am just based on the body of work that I've put out. I don't claim objectivity because I don't think objectivity exists. We all have our own personal or particular experience. And framing something as this is the objective point of view gets across a certain degree that you have come down as if there's some absolutist point of view that you can run with. That does not exist. It doesn't exist. The framing of it in and of itself is false. MSNBC is one of these news networks that put out a particular narrative of the world, a particular disposition of the world, that they will somewhat claim is objective. I mean, CNN may claim it a little bit more so, but MSNBC will claim they're not hiding the ball. They lean left. Again, I make the point they lean corporatist left. And for all intents and purposes, whether you're on Fox News or whether you're on MSNBC, ultimately you're talking about a Democratic Party or Republican establishment that are co-opted by oligarchs and take off economic concerns and have these fights about identity when the real nub of the issue is economic concerns. MSNBC, as such, has their own biases with people who are within kilter of their particular ideology or out of kilter with their particular ideology. Yang is one of those people that is out of kilter. And what Yang is experiencing when he's gone on MSC, especially for that debate, was the least amount of debating time, especially despite having a vibrant base of support. Not a fan of Yang. I've said it before. Yang lies about the Medicare for All stuff. And to me, if a candidate is being dishonest now, the candidate is also going to be dishonest later. Nevertheless, on this, I think Yang is right. Yang is demanding an apology from MSNBC. Now, there's more to this, and I'll talk about the more to this, but I think he's right in a literal sense. But I also think he's right from a political sense. I'll let him talk about it.
With us tonight, but I'd be remiss if I did not mention you were also invited on MSNBC this weekend, and you turned down that invitation and instead took to Twitter to slam the network, a decision that could be seen as risky during a Democratic primary. We're showing one of those tweets here, which reads in part, was asked to appear on MSNBC this weekend and told them that I'd be happy to after they apologize on air. What exactly do you want an apology for?
Well, Anna, Americans tuned in to the debate earlier this week, and they saw that I got called on less than any other candidate, including candidates that I'm polling higher than. And the questions I did get had virtually nothing to do with the core ideas of my campaign. And if this were an isolated incident, that would be one thing. But if you go back over the last number of months, MSNBC has literally omitted me from over a dozen fundraising and polling graphics, which it's not about me. It's about the 300,000 plus Americans who've donated to and support my campaign and the millions of Americans who know we need to rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to work for us. Think about those people donating $10, $20 of their hard-earned money to put a candidate on the stage and then have MSNBC virtually ignore me for 32 minutes, or when they tune into MSNBC to see how we're doing in the polls, it's like I don't exist. And you can go through the records. You can see they've done it to me over and over again. And I'm not the kind of guy who takes offense.
Yang is right, by the way. He's right. He's right on a few points. I mean, the moment that people are donating cash to him and money to him, they're doing so because they want him to succeed. They're not doing it for no reason. I don't think anybody would dump money into a candidate if they thought that candidate, for the most part, was just not going to be able to articulate what they want politically. His point is they're giving me cash. They're giving me money. And then when they tune into this event that's supposed to be fair, well, A, I don't get the debating time. And even when they're talking about the primaries and whatnot, they act as if I don't exist. Yeah, I'm not going back there. Screw MSNBC. I don't know why he's wrong. Honestly, I don't know why he's wrong. He's perfectly right from my standpoint. On another point, politically. So in a political sense, Andrew Yang looks at this and says, I am being screwed by this network. Andrew Yang has not made the debates in December, at least not yet. And Andrew Yang, despite having an animated base of support, the Yang Gang, still hasn't got over the criteria. MSNBC, knowing him in the debate in that way, prevents him in some way, meaning it hurts him. He needs some performance in the debate that people can see where he can gen up that much more support, get that much more donations in order to meet the criteria for the Democratic Party. If he can't do that within the context of a debate, it becomes hard to create a focal point where the public is paying attention to all at once in order to make that hurdle. Him bringing this to light from the standpoint of MSNBC is almost like a tossy gambit. I mean, ultimately, he's going beyond just the typical politics of issues and going into the edifice itself of saying, these guys are scoring me over. They have a certain political bias, and whatever that political bias, I would go so far as to say, probably don't even consider him a Democrat. Whatever that is, it is being displayed here, right here, in the way that they're doing this. And by drawing attention to that, getting other media networks to draw attention to that, you create a ring around yourself. Me, right here. Attention, look at me. Meaning he's setting himself on fire in a way that goes beyond the politics. And in doing so, drawing attention to himself from other either networks or either news articles that will be written about this very specific thing to get people to have eyes on Yang. Something that MSNBC was trying not to do in the debate. The politics makes sense, especially if your name is Andrew Yang. Not to mention, again, from my standpoint, he is correct. Yang was the candidate who spoke the least during the Wednesday Democratic debate in Atlanta. Per Hamilton Place strategies, he spoke 1,048 words. Warren, in comparison, spoke 2,622 words. Now, the point here is that Andrew Yang should have spoke the same amount as Warren. I mean, Warren, Sanders, Biden, these guys are front runners. They hate Sanders also, but at this point, they can't ignore him. He's a thorn in their shoe that he can't necessarily get out. In Yang's case, they do believe they can pull it off. He is ahead of some of the other candidates who spoke more than him. Him speaking 1,000 words or less in the debate seems unconscionable, considering that, again, he is ahead of many of the other candidates and he has a dedicated base of support. So I don't blame Yang on this. I think Yang is correct. And for the other side, MSNBC has yet to comment on Yang, but a source told Axios that the mistakes made concerning the former tech executive and other candidates have been inadvertent, given the large pool of candidates in the race. Our bad, we just accidentally gave him that least amount of time, or that small amount of time. From their perspective, however, if you're MSNBC and you don't like Yang, do you believe you can get away with it? Yes. You've been getting away with having a perspective of the race for this entire time, even going back to 2016, and I would probably postulate before. In this very specific case, MSNBC has a base of support that for all intents and purposes are Democrats, the Rachel Maddow watchers. Those Democrats may not feel any particular way about Yang. Meaning from MSNBC's standpoint, they can do this because they have a power distribution that allows them to do this, and a group of people who wouldn't care about it one way or the other. I don't think he's going to get that apology from MSNBC, and honestly, he may not even appear on the next Democratic debate stage. But from a political standpoint, he's right. And I would even argue from a fair race standpoint of looking at this event and saying this is not fair in the context of us being in a political contest or in a debate where we should get at least time commensurate with our position in the race. I don't blame him. I don't blame him. To make the point that much more clear, this is how they've been treating Sanders. Just to be clear, Yang is not insane on this. MSNBC has a very particular point of view of the world.
For me, as you know, again, I'm not the political analyst here, but just as a woman, probably considered a somewhat moderate Democrat, Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl. And I can't even identify for you what exactly it is, but I see him as sort of a not pro-woman candidate.
MSNBC, Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl. I have no idea why he makes my skin crawl, but I do think he's a anti-woman candidate. Here it is again.
There's a ceiling. There is nowhere to go, but there is no up to go. And all of those support, I actually overheard someone saying that I thought was an interesting point, that basically at this point, if you are still supporting Sanders as opposed to Warren, it's kind of showing your sexism because she has more detailed plans and her plans have evolved. I thought it was an interesting point, and I think there may be something to it.
I love the face at the end showing, yes, I am magnificently full of shit. Magnificently full of shit. That's how they've treated Sanders. So imagine how they feel about Andrew Yang, who again, they probably don't even consider to be a Democrat. Sanders' case, they're just stuck with him. So they say stuff like this when they go on the airwaves. Objective journalism, MSNBC. Corporate left. Look, somebody asked whether or not Sanders should take a similar approach as Yang on this, meaning I am not going on MSNBC because I don't necessarily like the way you've been covering me on air, because they have been dinging him also. I would argue they've been dinging him longer than they've been dinging Yang. I don't think Sanders can pull that off. A, I don't think he would do it. And B, I think it's unpredictable in regards to the outcome. Meaning Yang has already staked out this particular territory. Does Sanders benefit from going approach like this? My first instinct is no. Not to mention because it becomes predictable in regards to outcome. If the other Democrats are not going to agree with him on this, meaning he's going to be out by himself on this. And there's some issues, yes, you take on head on. And like I said, I agree with Yang totally on this. He had no political downside in doing this. But that's not true for Sanders, which is why, no, he's not going to do it. I don't think they would even consider doing it. And I think it would probably be a bad approach. I think it'd be a bad approach. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. I mean, this is what they've been running with from the standpoint of Sanders. And while I do think he should be less likely to go on those networks, whether he comes out and states it as just I'm not going on that network without an apology, I don't think he would ever do that. But whether it's slowing down the amount he goes on that network, whether he gives it less attention, all those things I think is true. Whether he should devote his energy to other sources, I absolutely think that's true. He already started his own channel, so that was one of the ways he gets his news and information out. Deprioritizing mainstream media networks that are treating you miserably and unfairly, I don't necessarily think that's a horrible strategy at all. But I don't think he can pull a Yang. I could be wrong, but I don't think he could pull a Yang. So, but I do agree with Yang. I agree with Yang on this. Riley, quality content, go Bernie. Go Bernie indeed. All right, I'm going to end this here. Like, share, subscribe. Yang doesn't fit within the labels. Maggie Smith, Yang doesn't fit well within any of the labels. I'm saying, well, Bernie, bro. Yeah, I think that's their issue, right? I mean, these guys are fiending for an old-time Democrat that may be a little bit to the left. That's what I think. If that was Biden, they'd be okay with that. If that was Warren, they'd be okay with that. If that was Buttigieg, they'd be okay with that. Kamala, yes, they will be okay with that. In fact, they will be okay with most of the people that are running in that race, even though they may have their certain favorites. But they have people who they vehemently dislike. Tulsi is one of them. Yang is one of them. And Sanders is one of them. The only difference is Sanders, they don't have a choice but to accept, even though they smear him at every opportunity. Oh, by the way, did you notice the gaslighting motif? The people told me, because they wanted to sound like it's people out there that have this belief that I've been engaging with, that I've come across this thing that said this was kind of sexist of Bernie Sanders. It's the motif that they use. Bernie's sexist. Bernie's sexist. That's what Bernie bro. That's how all of this stuff kind of tonally plays out. It's nonsense. It's gaslighting. But it is MSNBC, and that is kind of Yang's point. Like, share, subscribe.